There is a tree that holds up the sky. Its roots reach down into the realm of the dead. Its branches touch the halls of the gods. And somewhere in the middle, on its trunk, stands the world you and I actually live in, suspended between what came before and what waits after, held in place by a structure so ancient that no one can say which civilization imagined it first. In Scandinavia, this tree is called Yggdrasil, an immense ash whose branches stretch across all 9 worlds and whose roots are gnawed eternally by a serpent. In Mesopotamia, 4,000 years earlier, it was the Huluppu tree, planted on the banks of the Euphrates, home to a serpent at its base, an eagle in its crown, and a woman in its trunk who could not sleep. In India, it is the Ashvattha, the cosmic fig tree described in the Bhagavad Gita as growing upside down, its roots in heaven, its branches reaching toward earth. In Mesoamerica, it is the great ceiba, the sacred tree of the Maya, whose trunk was believed to be the literal center of the world, connecting the 13 layers of heaven to the 9 layers of the underworld. In Jewish mysticism, it becomes the Etz Chaim, the tree of life, whose branches are 10 divine emanations connecting the infinite unknowable God to the material world we inhabit. Different names, different bark, different roots, but the same fundamental architecture appearing in civilizations that never touched each other, each one independently arriving at the conclusion that the universe itself is best understood not as a sphere, not as a machine, but as a tree. Begin in Scandinavia, where the image reaches its most fully developed and most extensively documented form. Yggdrasil, described in the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda of Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century, but rooted in oral tradition centuries older, is an immense ash tree whose branches spread over all 9 worlds of Norse cosmology and whose 3 roots extend into 3 separate realms. One root reaches into Asgard, the realm of the gods, where it is watered daily by the Norns, the 3 weavers of fate from the well of Erd, the well of destiny itself. Another root reaches into Jotunheim, the realm of giants, where it draws from the well of Mimir, the well of wisdom, guarded by a being so ancient that even Odin sacrificed an eye for a single drink from it. A third root reaches into Niflheim, the realm of primordial ice and mist, gnawed continuously by the serpent Nidhogg, who chews at the root from below, while an eagle perches in the highest branches above, and a squirrel named Ratatoskr runs up and down the trunk, carrying insults between them, keeping the ancient hostility between the eagle and the serpent alive across the entire vertical axis of the cosmos. The structure here is precise and deliberate. Yggdrasil is not merely a tree that exists within the 9 worlds. It is the vertical axis that organizes them, the spine along which the entire structure of reality is arranged. Above, the gods and their wisdom. Below, the giants, the dead, the primordial ice, and the serpent gnawing at the foundation of everything. And running between them, carrying words up and down, an animal whose entire function is to make sure the hostility between top and bottom never fully resolves into peace. Why would a civilization imagine the cosmos this way? The Norse lived in a landscape defined by extremes: the brief, brilliant intensity of the northern summer, the long, brutal darkness of winter, mountains that touched the sky and fjords that plunged into unknowable depths. Their cosmology needed a structure that could hold together realms of radical difference: the order of Asgard and the chaos of Jotunheim, the light of the gods and the darkness beneath the roots. And crucially, the Norse world tree is not eternal or untroubled. It suffers, it is gnawed, it will eventually fall, along with everything it holds together, at Ragnarok. Yggdrasil is not a static symbol of cosmic order. It is a living structure, under constant assault, held together by the daily labor of the Norns, pouring water and clay onto its roots to keep it from rotting. This is a cosmology built by people who understood, deep in their bones, that order is not given. It is maintained, daily, against forces that never stop trying to tear it down. 4,000 years before Snorri Sturluson wrote down the myth of Yggdrasil, the Sumerians were already telling a strikingly similar story about a tree that connected the layers of the cosmos. The myth of the Huluppu tree, preserved in a Sumerian text that forms part of the larger Gilgamesh cycle, describes a tree planted by the goddess Inanna on the banks of the Euphrates. As it grows, 3 creatures make their home in it, each occupying a different vertical zone: a serpent that cannot be charmed nests among its roots. The Anzu bird, a monstrous lion-headed eagle, builds its nest in the branches, and the demon Lilith, makes her home in the hollow of the trunk. The tree, in other words, is already organized along the same vertical axis that would appear in Scandinavia millennia later. Serpent below, bird above, and a liminal, uncanny female presence in the middle. Inanna, distressed by these unwelcome tenants, calls on the hero Gilgamesh, who kills the serpent, drives away the Anzu bird, and forces Lilith to flee into the wilderness, after which Inanna is able to harvest the wood of the tree to make a throne and a bed for herself, and a drum and drumstick for Gilgamesh. What is remarkable here is not simply the presence of a cosmic tree with a serpent at its roots and a bird in its branches, a structure that would echo across cultures for the next 4,000 years, but the specific detail of what the tree is for. It is not merely a symbol, it is a resource. Its wood becomes furniture, becomes the throne of a goddess, becomes the drum that Gilgamesh will use in later parts of the myth, in ways that inadvertently cause suffering in the underworld. The Sumerian world tree reflects a civilization organized around irrigation agriculture on the banks of unpredictable rivers, where the boundary between the wild, uncanny forces at the base of existence and the ordered civilization built from natural resources was a daily, practical concern, not merely a theological abstraction. You had to clear the serpent from the riverbank before you could build your throne from the wood. In India, the cosmic tree takes on a philosophical dimension that inverts the entire structure in the most literal sense. The Ashvattha, described in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, composed sometime between the 5th and 2nd centuries BCE, is explicitly said to grow upside down. Its roots are above, in the highest heaven, and its branches spread downward, extending into the material world. Krishna tells Arjuna that this tree, whose leaves are the hymns of the Vedas, must be cut down with the strong axe of detachment before one can find the imperishable root from which it originally grew. This inversion is not a decorative flourish. It is the entire philosophical point. In Vedic and Vedantic thought, the material world that we perceive as fundamental, solid, present, primary, is understood to be secondary, a branch structure extending downward from a more fundamental spiritual reality that exists above and before it. The tree grows from the top down because, in this cosmology, the ultimate reality, Brahman, is prior to and more real than the physical manifestation we mistake for the whole of existence. What looks like roots to us, the ground beneath our feet, the physical world we take to be bedrock reality is, from the perspective of ultimate truth, merely the outermost branches of something rooted in a realm we cannot ordinarily perceive. And the philosophical instruction that follows is startling. This tree, magnificent and cosmic as it is, must eventually be cut down, not because it is evil, but because attachment to its branches to the world of appearances, desires, and material entanglement is precisely what keeps the soul trapped in the cycle of rebirth. The upside-down tree is one of the most sophisticated metaphysical images any civilization has ever produced, a diagram of the entire relationship between appearance and ultimate reality, expressed as a single arboreal structure that must be understood correctly and then transcended. In the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah, which developed primarily in medieval Spain and Provence but drew on much older esoteric traditions, the Etz Chaim, the tree of life, provides the central diagram of the entire mystical cosmology. The tree consists of 10 sephirot, divine emanations or attributes, arranged in 3 columns and connected by 22 paths, through which the infinite, unknowable divine reality called Ein Sof gradually contracts and manifests into the finite world we inhabit. At the top of the tree is Keter, the crown, representing the divine will so far beyond comprehension that it is described as nothingness. At the bottom is Malkuth, the kingdom, representing the physical world, the material creation, the realm of ordinary human experience. Between them flow the other emanations: wisdom, understanding, mercy, judgment, beauty, victory, glory. The foundation, each one a further step in the process by which infinite divine light steps down through successive contractions into forms the finite human mind can begin to grasp. What distinguishes the Kabbalistic tree from the Norse or Sumerian versions is its function. It is not primarily a cosmological map of physical realms, but a spiritual technology, a meditative diagram designed to be climbed. The mystic's task, in this tradition, is to ascend the tree consciously, moving upward through the Sephirot, from the material world of Malkuth, back toward the unknowable source of Keter. using each emanation as a rung, a lens, a stage of consciousness to be integrated and passed through on the way back to the divine unity from which everything originally emanated. The tree here is not something you live beneath, as the Norse lived beneath Yggdrasil, or something whose wood you harvest, as Inanna harvested the Huluppu tree. It is something you climb, internally, through prayer, meditation, and moral refinement, a structure for organizing the return of the individual soul to its ultimate source. Cross the Atlantic to Mesoamerica, and the Maya conception of the cosmic tree, called Yaxke or Waka Chan in different sources, integrates the vertical cosmology of the Old World traditions with an explicitly geographic and calendrical precision that has no real parallel elsewhere. For the Maya, the world tree was not merely a mythological image, but a literal cosmological diagram, physically embodied at the center of Maya cities in the form of ceiba trees planted in central plazas, and symbolically represented on stelae and in the Dresden Codex as a great ceiba whose roots penetrated the 9 layers of Xibalba, the underworld, whose trunk passed through the middle world where human beings lived, and whose branches supported the 13 layers of the heavens above. The Maya additionally associated the 4 cardinal directions with 4 colored world trees, a red ceiba in the east, a white ceiba in the north, a black ceiba in the west, and a yellow ceiba in the south, with the great green or blue-green ceiba standing at the absolute center, uniting the horizontal 4-directional map of the earth with the vertical axis connecting underworld, middle world, and heaven into a single, unified, coordinate system. This is cosmology as literal cartography. The Maya used the world tree not only to explain the structure of the universe philosophically, but to organize actual physical and ritual space, orienting their cities, their calendars, and their religious ceremonies around this precise arboreal map of reality. The Maya king, in ritual bloodletting ceremonies documented at sites including Yaxchilan, would pierce his own tongue or genitals and pass a rope through the wound, inducing a vision in which the world tree itself would appear, its trunk becoming a conduit through which ancestors and gods could communicate with the living. The tree, for the Maya, was not simply a metaphor for cosmic structure. It was a functioning technology of communication between the layers of reality, activated through ritual and royal blood. Now step back and ask, why this specific image, a tree connecting underworld, middle world, and heaven? With a serpent typically at its roots, and a bird typically in its branches, recurs with such consistency across civilizations that could not have influenced each other. Mircea Eliade, the historian of religion who spent much of his career studying what he called the axis mundi, the cosmic axis, the center of the world, argued that the world tree represents one of the most universal expressions of a fundamental religious need, the need for a fixed point that connects the different levels of reality and makes orientation possible. Without such an axis, Eliade argued, human beings experience the world as chaotic, undifferentiated, without a center. The world tree provides that center. It is the point at which the sacred breaks through into ordinary space, the ladder by which communication between heaven, earth, and underworld becomes structurally possible. Every temple mount, every sacred pole, every ceremonial pillar in every religious tradition on earth is, in Eliade's framework, a local instantiation of the same fundamental need, a physical marker of the place where the layers of reality touch each other. Why a tree specifically, rather than a mountain, or a pillar, or a rope? Because trees are the only naturally occurring objects that visibly and simultaneously occupy all 3 cosmic zones at once. Their roots genuinely penetrate the earth and reach toward the hidden, buried, underworld realm of decomposition and renewal. Their trunk stands in the world of ordinary daylight experience where humans actually live, and their branches genuinely reach toward the sky, toward the birds, toward the realm the Norse called Asgard and the Maya called the 13 heavens. No other natural object performs this 3-part function so literally. A mountain has a peak that reaches toward the sky, but its roots do not obviously penetrate an underworld in the way a tree's roots visibly disappear into the soil where the dead are buried, where seeds germinate, where things unseen are nonetheless clearly happening. The tree does all 3 jobs of the axis mundi at once, using the same trunk, and it does so visibly, in the actual physical world, in every civilization's actual physical environment. It does not need to be imagined. It needs only to be looked at correctly. There is also a psychological dimension that Carl Jung would have recognized immediately. The tree, in Jungian terms, is one of the primary symbols of individuation, the lifelong psychological process by which a person integrates the unconscious, instinctual, underworld aspects of the self with the conscious, aspirational, heavenly aspects of the self, growing, in the process, into a fully realized individual. The roots of the tree, reaching into dark, hidden soil, represent the unconscious, the instincts, the repressed material, the ancestral inheritance that a person does not choose and cannot fully see. The branches, reaching toward light, represent consciousness, aspiration, the ideals a person consciously pursues, and the trunk, the visible, solid, enduring structure, connecting the two, represents the ego, the conscious self, which must draw nourishment from the hidden roots while growing toward the light of the branches, integrating both without being destroyed by either extreme. A tree with no roots falls over. A tree with no branches cannot photosynthesize, cannot grow, cannot reach toward what sustains it from above. Psychological health, in this understanding, requires exactly the same balance the world tree myths describe cosmologically. An honest, ongoing relationship with what lies buried and hidden below, combined with a genuine reaching toward what lies illuminated and aspirational above, held together by a trunk sturdy enough to bear the tension between them without splitting. What connects Yggdrasil's daily maintenance against Nidhogg's gnawing, the Huluppu tree's uneasy tenants that must be cleared before the wood can be harvested, the Ashvattha that must be understood correctly and then cut down, the Kabbalistic tree that must be climbed rung by rung back to its source, and the Maya ceiba whose trunk becomes a conduit for royal blood and ancestral vision, is the same underlying insight, expressed through the only living thing on earth that visibly performs the work of connecting what is buried, what is present, and what is beyond reach. Every civilization that built a version of this tree was making the same claim, that reality is not flat, that existence has a vertical structure as well as a horizontal one, that the world you can see and touch is only the trunk of something whose roots disappear into what came before you and whose branches reach toward what waits after you, and that a human life, properly understood, is not merely a location on the ground, but a position somewhere along that entire living axis connected, whether you feel it or not, to depths you did not create and heights you have not yet reached. There is one more tradition that belongs in this comparison, and it comes from a civilization with no conceivable connection to Scandinavia, Mesopotamia, India, the Levant, or Mesoamerica. The Chinese Taoist and folk religious concept of Fusang, and more broadly, the cosmic tree traditions embedded in early Chinese mythology, recorded in texts like the Shanhai Jing, the classic of mountains and seas. In Chinese tradition, the Fusang tree grows in the Eastern Ocean, at the place where the sun rises, and it is here that 10 sunbirds, the 10 sons of Chinese mythology, who in the myth of the archer Ho Yi once rose into the sky simultaneously and had to be shot down to prevent the world from burning, perch and take turns crossing the sky each day. A parallel tree, Ruomu, stands in the far west, at the place where the sun sets, its blossoms glowing with their own inner light in the growing darkness. Between Fusang in the east and Ruomu in the west lies the entire daily journey of the sun, and the trees mark the two fixed points of an axis that is horizontal rather than vertical, east to west rather than underworld to heaven. This is a significant variation on the world tree theme, where the Norse, Sumerian, Indian, Jewish, and Maya traditions all organize their cosmic trees primarily along a vertical axis connecting underworld, middle world, and heaven. The Chinese tradition also produces a horizontal cosmic tree axis, tracking the sun's movement across the sky rather than the soul's movement between cosmic levels. And in the more explicitly Taoist tradition, there is also Jianmu, the leaning tree, or ladder tree, said to stand at the very center of the world, used by shamans, sages, and even the legendary Yellow Emperor to travel between heaven and earth, a vertical axis mundi that sits alongside the horizontal one, suggesting that Chinese cosmology, rather than choosing between a vertical or horizontal organizing structure, found ways to hold both simultaneously. A civilization comfortable with organizing the same underlying intuition that trees mark the fixed points where different orders of reality touch each other along more than one axis at once. The recurrence of this image across civilizations that could not have shared it demonstrates something important about how meaning gets built into the natural world by human minds encountering it honestly. No committee of ancient priests, meeting in secret, decided that trees should represent cosmic order and then disseminated the idea to Scandinavia and Sumer and India and Mesoamerica and China. Each civilization looked at an actual tree, its roots vanishing into soil where the dead decompose and where new life germinates, its trunk standing in the world where daily human life visibly occurs, its branches disappearing into a sky whose upper reaches no human being had ever touched, and arrived, independently, at the conclusion that this ordinary, everyday object was in fact a diagram of everything. The tree did not need to be invented as a symbol, it only needed to be seen clearly enough, by people paying the kind of full, reverent attention that turns an object into an image, and an image into a structure large enough to hold an entire civilization's understanding of where they stood between the world below and the world above.